Right here, under my feet, is where the first convicts stepped onto the mud in 1788. But what most people don't know is that exactly 1 month later, this very path became the route to the first execution in the colony. And today, we're going to walk that trail, starting here at the original shoreline and ending at the site of the fatal tree up in the rocks. Stick around, this one gets pretty dark. But first, g'day everyone, and a massive welcome back to the channel. Honestly, it's great to have you along for another wander. Before we get into the grit of the story, I just wanted to say a huge thank you to all our subscribers and a special shout out to our channel members for the Burbs, Jim Hook. I will link his channel in the description. And Jimmy, again, thank you. A double shout out for you. Your support keeps these walks going, so cheers for being absolute legends. Now, have a look at this dark line in the paving and these brass plates in the ground. The brass plates mark the original 1788 shoreline, and that dark paving, that is the 1807 high water mark. Back then, this was the edge of the world. This was the original shoreline. Everything behind us now was just water and mud. It is wild to think the First Fleet rode their longboats right up to where we are standing now. We are just heading up Loftus Street now, making our way toward Macquarie Place Park. You might be wondering, what does this quiet little park have to do with the story of the first hanging in Australia? Well, it is all connected. This area was the seat of power. The orders that decided who lived and who died in this colony were signed and delivered just a stone's throw from where we are walking. Before we get to the site of the fatal tree, we need to understand where the authority came from. The park ahead was the civic heart, the place where the laws of a distant king were laid down on a brand new land. It is a peaceful spot today, but in 1788, the decisions made around here carried a very heavy weight. We are going to take a quick look at the center of that power before we head up the hill. Now, as we head into the park, you will find a few pieces of the past tucked away under the trees. Over to the side there, you will see an anchor and a cannon. Those actually came off the HMS Sirius, the flagship that led the First Fleet into the cove. I have covered the history of that ship in some of my other videos. You should definitely check those out later on. Further in, you will spot that stone needle. That is the obelisk of distances from 1818. It was the 0 point for the colony. The spot where every road in the state officially began. It was the absolute center of their world. The seat of power was right here. The colony was raised on this very ground, and just up the road there, the governor had his first house. From this spot, the entire future of the settlement was being directed. But as time went on, things started to get desperate. The ships weren't arriving, the soil was poor, and the food was running dangerously short. Everyone was hungry, and the tension was rising. To keep the colony from falling into total chaos, Governor Phillip had to draw a line in the sand. He made a new law, a brutal one: death to anyone caught stealing from the government rations. It did not matter if you were starving. If you took from the stores, you were a dead man. And it was not long before someone was caught and the law had to be carried out. The tank stream, the life giver of the colony, was also that border. This side, the east side, was where the governor and the officers lived. This was the side of authority and power. The convicts were housed on the other side with the troops. That was the west side, the rugged and rocky ground. As the food ran out, that divide between the two sides became a matter of life and death. When a man named Thomas Barrett decided to take what he needed from the government stores, he was crossing more than just a stream. He was challenging the law of the east side from the shadows of the west. The target for Thomas Barrett and his mates was the public store. Back then it was just a collection of tents and temporary sheds sitting on the mud right near the water. They were not just stealing food, they were stealing from the only thing keeping everyone in this colony alive. The stores were filled with the rations brought over on the ships. Barrels of salted pork, bags of peas and butter. For Barrett, it was a desperate gamble that did not pay off. He was caught red-handed, and the law that Governor Phillip had laid down was about to be put to the ultimate test. Thomas Barrett did not act alone in this. He was part of a small group of 4 men, including John Ryan, Joseph Hall and Henry Lovell. They were all caught together, 4 desperate convicts looking for a bit of extra food in a colony that was slowly starving. They were brought before a new kind of court, a mix of military officers and legal authority that had never been seen in this land before. For these 4, it was a terrifying situation. They were not just being tried for theft, they were being tried for the survival of the settlement. Governor Phillip felt he had no choice but to make an example of them. All 4 were sentenced to death, but as the story goes, not everyone met the same fate. The weight of that sentence was meant to send a shockwave through the camp to show every other convict that the rules had changed now that they were on this side of the world. It is wild to think about how fast it all happened. They were caught in the morning, and by that same afternoon they were already standing in front of a row of officers. There was no long wait for a trial back then. The law was fast, and it was final. All 4 of them were sentenced to die right there and then. But at the last minute, the governor decided to pull back a bit. He gave 3 of the men a reprieve, but Barrett was not so lucky. He was the one chosen to be the warning to everyone else. But then they hit a snag. Nobody in the colony wanted the job of the hangman, none of the Marines would do it, and none of the convicts wanted to be the one to kick the ladder out from under their own mate. So they turned to one of the other men in the group, the bloke named John Ryan. The man that turned state's evidence on his mates, the guy that dobbed them in and was only 24. They gave him a pretty brutal choice. He could either be the one to hang his friend, or he could join him on the hill. Ryan took the deal to save his own skin. And so the very first execution in this country was carried out by a man hanging his own mate just to stay alive himself. It was only a few days later that another convict named James Freeman was given a similar deal, becoming the first official permanent hangman for the colony. But on that first afternoon, it was all about desperate choices in a desperate place. The thing about Thomas Barrett that most people do not realise is that the man was a highly skilled artist. Before he was a convict, he was an engraver. And he was so good at it that he had already escaped the rope twice back in England because people were impressed by his skills. On the voyage over on the ship Charlotte, he actually got caught forging fake coins out of old buttons and spoons. He was passing them off to the locals when they stopped in Rio de Janeiro. But instead of punishing him, the ship's surgeon, a bloke named John White, was so impressed by the quality of the work that he gave Barrett a silver kidney dish and some tools. He asked him to make a medal to commemorate the voyage. Barrett carved a beautiful image of the ship at anchor in Botany Bay with all the coordinates and the date, 1788. Today, that medal is known as the Charlotte Medal, and it is considered the very first piece of Australian colonial art. The Maritime Museum actually bought it a few years back for $750,000. The spot they chose for the gallows was not accidental. They picked a massive gum tree that sat right on the ridge of the hill. It was perfectly placed between the male and female convict camps on the west side of the cove. Just here at what is now the Four Seasons Hotel entrance was where the ladies' camp was, and up ahead on the corner of the road was about where the men's camp was. By selecting the tree right there on the ridge, it meant that no matter which camp you were in, you could not look up without seeing it. It was a constant silent warning to the whole colony. Governor Phillip wanted maximum exposure because he needed the death of Thomas Barrett to be a brutal reminder to every person down there. It was a sight of pure terror and a grim landmark on the skyline that everyone had to live with. It is a bit of a head spin when you look at all these modern buildings and smooth roads around us now. Back then, this whole area was just pure wilderness. There was no pavement and no glass towers, just massive Sydney red gums and thick scrub stretching as far as you could see. This was only the very start of what this country was to become. It was a tiny group of people trying to make a go of it in a land that was as rugged as it was beautiful. The only sounds back then were the wind in the trees and the first sounds of the axes clearing the way for the settlement. Everything we see today grew out of those first few difficult months right here on this rocky ridge. As we head up the hill now, we are walking what they used to call Hangmans Hill. It is Essex Street today, but back then it was just a rocky ridge between the two camps. The whole colony was summoned here on that afternoon in 1788. Every convict had to stand and watch so they would know exactly what happens when you break the governor's law. At the top of this rise stood a large gum tree. That was the gallows. There were no fancy wooden structures yet, just a sturdy branch and a rope. Thomas Barrett was marched up here with a party of Marines. It is said he did not show any real fear until he actually had to mount the ladder. That is when the reality of it finally hit him. He was only 30 years old when he was launched into eternity at 6 p.m. He was buried right nearby in an unmarked grave. It is a heavy thought to think that the same man who created the first piece of colonial art just a few weeks earlier was also the first one to meet his end here. This is where it all happened. There is a small green plaque on the wall here that marks the spot. It is easy to miss if you are not looking for it. It says that Thomas Barrett, a First Fleet convict, was hanged near this place on 27th February 1788 for stealing provisions and was buried nearby. That is the story of the first hanging in Australia, a talented engraver and a desperate thief who became a footnote in history. Thanks for coming along on this walk through the rocks today. I really appreciate the support from all the subscribers and our channel members. It means a lot to have you legends with me. I will see you on the next one. Take it easy. See ya.